Hello?
Hi, is this Jerry?
Yes, it is.
All right, well, let me do the official introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very excited to welcome our featured guest for this evening. Someone that America grew up with, known as Beaver Cleaver, and for the famed quote, things like, working isn't as much fun as I thought it would be. I wonder why older people do it so much. Maybe he can explain it to us. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very excited to welcome Mr. Jerry Mathers to the show. You're on the air live with Terry and Tiffany. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I never could figure that out, why people like to work so much. I guess it's because they like to eat so much.
Well, it's really cool for you, Jerry, because am I right in understanding you're one of the first child stars to actually get money from the merchandising and stuff?
Absolutely. That was one of the things that my dad negotiated in the contract. In fact, most other, even adult actors, didn't get anything for the merchandising because merchandising was really just coming into vogue when Leave It to Beaver started in the 50s, where, you'd have a product like Hopalong and Cassidy had guns and things like that. So I was one of the first people that got merchandising rights for Leave It to Beaver.
Well, I'm glad you had cool parents because a lot of, people didn't really think about that stuff back then. That's why they wound up, even with residuals and stuff, getting the Jackie Coogan law and everything.
Right, yes. In fact, that was in actually the 20s and 30s. So,
yeah.
A lot of people just didn't realize that, kids didn't have a whole lot of rights in those times. In fact, even the adult actors didn't have any merchandising rights. So, there's just a lot of things that got worked out, and it was a very, very good experience for me.
Wow. Well, growing up basically in television the way you did, of course you did movies before that, we'll talk about that, but filming on the Universal lot, am I right in knowing that at the same time you were filming, were they doing McHale's Navy and the Munsters?
Well, not the Munsters, because the Munsters was done by Conley and Mosier. That was the show they moved on to after Leave It to Beaver finished.
Mm-hmm.
But there was Spartacus was there was the Munsters, there was all... The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock. There were all sorts of things. It was a ongoing motion picture and television lot. And in fact, they didn't even have the tour. They had the bus that went around because it was such a big lot that people would go around just to get from one part of one stage to maybe the other part of the lot. They had the bus. And when all the people like my mom and Tony Dow's mom would bring friends in to show them the studio, they'd get on the bus. And the executives at Universal said, you know what, if these people are doing that, why couldn't we start a little bus and just run them around and charge people? And that's how the Universal Studios tours started.
Oh, wow, I like that. That's a great story. I've got to wonder, because the exteriors, the house that they showed for the exteriors is still there. Do you still go to Universal? Do you go on the tour, and do you kind of like look at the house and just remember?
Really not, no. The house has been there for a long time. It was actually built for Bedtime for Bonzo with Ronald Reagan. Not only was it the Leave It to Beaver house, it was the Marcus Welby house. So that's on Colonial Street. If anybody's ever been on the tour, they'll know that that's one of the streets. They have a Western Street and a whole bunch of different streets, but that is Colonial Street. So that house has been there for a long, long time. Now, when we did it, it was just a shell. And now it's been totally updated, and it's actually a real house now. It has the only working bathroom on the back lot. So anybody that wants to go to the bathroom has to run over to the Leave It to Beaver house, and it has a men's and a women's bathroom in the back of it.
Now, when you did the reunion movie, which is still The Beaver, it became a series that they had on the Disney Channel. I believe they ran it on TBS. Did they use that house?
It was the exact same house, yes.
Wow. God, what was it like going back after all these years of not having done a show and then you're doing it again, you're in the same place and everything? I know that was for exteriors. You probably did the inside shots in the studio. But what was it like as far as remembering coming back? Is it kind of like a high school reunion or something?
Well, it was, but it was something that we'd all stayed good friends. So, Tony Dow and and Barbara Billingsley, of course, Hugh Beaumont had passed away, but we'd all remained fairly good friends, so it wasn't like we hadn't seen each other. We were doing different things. In fact, the way that we got to do the new Leave It to Beaver is that Tony Dow and I did a play together that was doing standing room only business all across the country for 18 months. And the people in New York and Los Angeles said, if they're that popular doing something that isn't Leave It to Beaver, what if we did the movie? And the movie, Still the Beaver, was the number 3 movie of 1982. So they thought, well, gee, we'll make a series of it. But we'd always been friends. So Tony and I and Ken Osmond, who played Eddie, and Frank Banks and Barbara Billingsley and Hugh Beaumont, we'd all remain friends. And we'd see each other at a lot of, Christmas parades and all the different things that we do together.
Mm-hmm. Now, and Still the Beaver, you were basically the dad. All of a sudden, you're a dad. You've got the son and everything. Did you feel that you had to act more like Hugh Beaumont because he always had all this great, stories and passing things down onto the kids? Did you kind of base the way you were as the adult Beaver on Hugh Beaumont?
Well, not really, and I'll tell you why. Because as an actor, you really don't get to do that. You have to go in, and that's all written. I mean, all the things that we did, even in the original Leave It to Beaver, that wasn't just ad-lib. Those are all scripted, and you rehearse it for 2 days. So I think they in some ways featured things that Hugh Beaumont might have done, but they also had respect for the character. So you couldn't. Actually, Wally would probably have been a much better character to have focused on if you wanted to be like Ward. Although Beaver was a good dad,
right.
He had a lot of problems. In fact, that's why I moved back to Mayfield, because I was getting a divorce and my wife was running off to, I think it was Germany with somebody, and so I took my 2 kids back to Mayfield so I could have the same kind of life. And and I was always the Beaver and had problems, where Wally was the very successful attorney in that show.
Sure. He had a cutest little daughter, too. I remember her.
Right. We finally got to get a little girl into Leave It to Beaver.
For sure. I've got to wonder, too, Jerry. I mean, having come from a TV show that was so wholesome and everything, I know that you raised 3 children. And when you raised your children, I would assume they're grown now, I'm not sure. But when you raised your children, did you kind of want to instill like the same values in them that maybe a Ward Cleaver would have instilled into the Beaver?
Well, I think every parent would. I mean, any parent that's, a parent of any kind of integrity would love to do that. But just like Ward and June, raising kids is always difficult. Whenever you deal with personalities and things, it's always a very difficult road when you raise kids. It's fun and they're great, and I have great kids. But, there are a lot of things that go on. And in Leave It to Beaver, every problem is solved in basically 28 minutes. So, real life and Leave It to Beaver. Leave It to Beaver is situation comedy. It's not meant to be, a reality show or a docudrama. So every week, it was comedy that we were trying to do, not anything that was serious or, and, it was a very, very good show and very funny.
Right. Well, we were saying hello to Antenna TV, and they're now running Leave It to Beaver, and they're owned by Tribune, and they also own KTLA, which is Channel 5 here in Los Angeles. And they recently had Jay North on in some interview segments for the news, and he was talking about a hellacious life on a set, but I don't get that from you at all. I don't think it was like that for you at Universal, was it?
No. Jay had a lot of problems with, his parents were telling him things like, I think he had an aunt and an uncle living with him and also their kids, and if he didn't work, that they wouldn't have food on the table or a roof over their head. So he had tremendous pressure put on him. I was very, very lucky. My dad was fully employed. When I was doing Leave It to Beaver, he was the vice principal and then principal of one of the largest high schools in the LA Unified School District. So not only was he used to having, a son that was an actor, because I'd been an actor since I was 2 years old, but he was used to dealing with kids every day and knew, what was right and what was wrong, and he was fully employed. So it wasn't like my parents were living off the money from Leave It to Beaver, as Jay North's family was, and, extended family.
And in as much as you had made a comment, too, about not understanding why adults like to work, and all of a sudden you're a child that had to work, I don't assume it was really hard for you, because didn't I see you say somewhere that you just had no problem at all remembering lines?
Yeah, actually, I turned a disability into an acting career, because I am dyslexic, and so I had a lot of trouble reading. And when I was trying to first learn how to read, especially in school, we used to sit around in a circle, and you'd go from person to person, and you'd have to read a segment. And my mom, I would have her read it to me the night before and memorize it so that I wouldn't be embarrassed that I couldn't, I'd read different words. So what my dyslexia, I can read an entire page and know what it says. In fact, I have a degree. I'm a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley. I have a degree in philosophy, but I can't read it exactly as it's printed because I just see different words.
Mm-hmm. Well, man, I tell you, you were so lucky to be in the era you were in, because those shows were shot like a movie, and they were shot on film and mostly 35 millimeter.
Yeah, the Leave It to Beaver is all shot on. Now, the new Leave It to Beaver was shot on 16, just to show you the change that from the old to the new Leave It to Beaver.
But you look at a show like yours, and you look at McHale's Navy, and you look at the Munsters. God, they look so much better. You look at shows like Three's Company, and with age and all this time, they just don't look that great. And shows that were shot on film, they are a movie. They look like a movie, and they're so much better.
They were definitely they were shot. In fact, that's the reason people always say, well, how come you guys never had a blooper reel or anything like that? Well, they were shot on 35 millimeter film, just like the people used to use in their cameras. And that had silver nitrate in it. So anything that wasn't printed, in other words, we might shoot, a scene 3 or 4 or 5 times. Anything that wasn't printed was taken that night, and the film was stripped to get the silver nitrate out of it. So there are no outtakes. There were a lot of funny things that happened, but they never made it because no one ever thought that somebody would want to see our outtakes or any of our mistakes.
Right. Well, thank God they kept all of them, because I've had a lot of directors and producers on this show that's told horror stories of their stuff being basically trashed because they wanted to take the silver out of the film. That's sad.
Well, not only that, but the film disintegrates and stuff. Like Paul Winchell was talking about how he didn't get any of his shows together. Jerry, I wanted to ask you, I know that you kind of started out your career very, very young. At age 2, and I believe your first job was in a commercial with Ed Wynn. Do you remember back working at age 2?
Yes, actually. That when I worked with Ed Wynn, my mom actually, people always say, well, your parents must have been, wanting you to be in movies and television, and you have a real studio family. My mom was from Minnesota. My dad was from Iowa. He came out here under the GI Bill to go to USC. And my mom happened to be, when I was 2 years old, walking through a department store. A woman walked up to her and said, is this your little boy? He fits the 2-year-old clothes. We would like to ask you if maybe he could be a model for us. And my mom said, well, she was from Minnesota. She was thinking this is some sort of a con or something. She says, well, I don't know. And the lady said, well, you know what? If he could be a model for us and do some runway work, we would pay him and he could keep the clothes. And my mom was thinking, that sounds like a good deal. So that's actually how I started. And people say, well, how would you transition from being a model to being on TV? Well, at that time, TV was brand new, and there was no film. Everything at that time was live. This was in the early 50s, 1950s, as a matter of fact. And so there were no child actors out here in California that could do live TV, because everything here, Mickey Rooney and Elizabeth Taylor, they all worked in film. So this was all live. So the only kids that worked out here on live shows were the models, because they did runway work. You'd walk up with a model and do runway work.
Well, there you go. For a young man starting out a career, to know that you had to suddenly work with probably the most imposing director in history, which is Alfred Hitchcock. You did The Trouble with Harry. I've heard a lot of stories about Alfred. Do you remember anything about him at all? Was he imposing?
Oh, yes. I had a great relationship with him, because not only did I work on The Trouble with Harry with him, and we went back to Vermont. And when a TV crew goes back on location, it's very different than working at the studio, because you're kind of there, and basically, you're basically a crew, which is what they're called. But everybody knows everybody, and then there's all the townspeople. So Alfred Hitchcock and I got along very, very well. In fact, one of the things they do is they had all the local people cater. And he was a gourmet, and he knew the best food. And like in the morning, we'd run up to the craft service table, and of course, since he was Alfred Hitchcock, he would walk up there first. But, I didn't know any better, so I'd just go right up with him, and I'd say, oh, which blueberry muffins are you going to pick? And these ladies were out all night, all day picking blueberry muffins and then cooking them, and then each one would have their little stack, and he would kind of walk back and forth and pick which one he thought was the best blueberry muffin for that day from one of the ladies' different piles. And I'd say, oh, is that the best one? And pick it up. And I'd see him years later, because when I was doing Leave It to Beaver, he was doing Alfred Hitchcock Presents, so he'd be in there about, probably once every 4 or 5 weeks, and he'd, drive in a big Rolls Royce, and I'd be outside, and he'd see me, he'd roll down the window, and he'd go, oh, hello, Mr. Mathers, how are you today? Always called me. In fact, he was the first person that ever called me Mr. Mathers, never called me Jerry. When he saw me when I was doing Leave It to Beaver, never called me Beaver. I was always Mr. Mathers.
Wow. Well, yeah, it was so surreal for me, Jerry. Maybe it's hard for you to understand this because you're Jerry, okay? But the first time I met you, I was at Retrofest, and I know we gave some of those pictures to your lovely wife, Teresa, for you. Mm-hmm. But, I watched you and grew up with you, and all of a sudden, there you are. You were wearing a sweater. You were still wearing a sweater with the Beaver. And it was just so surreal when I saw you. Does people kind of when they see you in a grocery store, they kind of stand back and look and all of a sudden...
Well, at Retrofest, especially when I'm wearing a Mayfield Letterman sweater, I stand out a lot more. So a lot of people, when they see me at different places that have nothing to do with something like that, will think that they know me for someplace, and people will say, well, where did you grow up? And I'll say California. I was born in Sioux City, Iowa, but I was only there for about 3 or 4 months, and my dad came out here after the GI Bill. So,
right.
I say, well, I grew up in California, and they'll say, oh, because I thought you looked just like somebody. Did you ever date? And they'll tell me whatever their daughter's name was, or, they say, did you ever attend this school or that school? Because people know they know me, but they just can't figure out from where.
Well, let me ask you, how was that kind of growing up? Because I know that you did the acting thing, and then you kind of took a little break for a while to go through high school. And being involved in something like Leave It to Beaver, which became so big and so iconic, what was it like? And to this day, everybody's still like, oh, yeah, Jerry Mathers, the Beaver. How is that kind of coping with that daily, and how was that growing up? Did it help you?
Well,
Did it bother you?
I'll tell you what happened. When Leave It to Beaver ended, the Universal Studios had 2 more movies that they wanted me to do, and also another series. And my dad and mom came to me and said, do you want to do this? Now, I had been working on Leave It to Beaver for 6 years, so I had gone basically, from almost first grade all the way through, and I was getting ready to go to high school. Mm-hmm. And they said, do you want to do this? And I said, no, I want to go to a regular high school. And because my dad was fully employed, my parents went back to the studio and said, no, he wants to go to a regular high school. And so I went to a local high school out here in California, and I wanted to play sports because that was one of the things. In fact, when I was doing Leave It to Beaver, I had a private tutor. Tony Dow had a private tutor. I had a private tutor. They were LA Unified School District's best teachers because my dad, being at that time a principal, could find the best teachers. So Tony, who is now an award-winning sculptor, he just opened a piece in the Louvre about a year ago, always had teachers that had doctorates in art. And so I just wanted to go to regular school. But I also wanted to play sports. And when I was a freshman, I went out for football, and that was in the summer right before. It was like a pre-camp for the football team. I made the team, but when I started school, I went to a Notre Dame high school over in Sherman Oaks, so it was an all-boys school. But I was part of the football team, so people didn't really think of me as the Beaver. They thought of me as somebody that was on the football team.
Well, good.
And so, I had a very, very good transition. I'd always wanted to go to college because at that time a lot of people said, actors are all pretty stupid and they can't even probably finish high school. So I took the money from Leave It to Beaver and then went to Berkeley, and as I say, I graduated from Berkeley, and I was going to become a lawyer. And the way I'd put myself through Berkeley was by investing the money that I had made from Leave It to Beaver with a banker. And he said, you know what, you could go out and you can go to law school for another 3 years. But if you want, the day you get your degree, I've kind of watched you do this with half of the money that you've made. I'll make you a banker. So I became a banker. I was worked for the seventh largest bank in the United States for about 4 years. I became a loan officer. And then Tony Dow called me in I was in my late 20s and said, would you want to do a stage play with me? And I went out and did a stage play and started selling commercial real estate. And so I had been out of acting for quite a while until I did the new Leave It to Beaver.
Well, the thing is, it's got to bug you. It would bug me that you're known so much for one thing when you've done so many other things. But like even, the night of the party where we went to the party for where your wife and my daughter works, I won't say where that is. We don't want people bugging her for autographs and stuff. But as much as you love your fans, I often wonder if it doesn't bug you a little bit, or maybe it's a little embarrassing sometimes that people's always coming up calling you the Beaver. For instance, the night that we were there, I was very conscious to make sure that, like, you're Jerry, and you come up to me and you put your hand on my head, hi, I'm Jerry. I'm like, hi, Jerry. I did not want to give you the impression that I was looking at you as the Beaver, and I imagine people do sometimes.
Well, you know what? I'm a person, too, so when I meet people that are actors, I know that feeling. So I know all the time, as you read off, I heard you before reading off all the credits and things that I've done. So I've met a lot of very, very famous people. And it really doesn't bother me. I know that a lot of people, just because that's what they know me as, basically I grew up in people's living rooms. So
right.
They just think that's, they know me. And a lot of people, somewhere I think in the back of their minds, think that the things that happened really did happen to me. They don't realize that was all scripted, and, we were all good friends, but Barbara Billingsley and Hugh Beaumont went home, and Barbara had 2 sons, and Hugh had a son and 2 daughters, and I had brothers and sisters. Tony had an older brother. So, I realize that when I see people, I think that they're that character, but they're really not either. So it never bothers me. It's always a compliment to have people even recognize you and say, it was a good show, which most people think it was, and, how much they enjoyed it. So it's only a compliment, and that's the way I take it. It's like, I did a lot of work, and it was a lot of fun, but it's always nice to have somebody say that they enjoy it.
Well, if anybody would have been at that Christmas party that night, they would know you're not just the Beaver, because the Beaver couldn't dance that well. You dance like nobody I've ever seen.
My wife has for years told me that I am not a very good dancer, and you know what? I always tell her that I don't really care, because I just dance the way I feel. I listen to music, and I've been on Broadway. I did Hairspray on Broadway, but I dance the way I feel. It was very hard when I was on Broadway. That was probably the hardest part. I thought the singing would be the hardest part on Broadway, but actually the hardest part was actually dancing and having to do the same step every night and hit it to perfection every night. So probably that was the toughest acting job I've ever done, is being on Broadway. But it's such a small fraternity of people that can say that they have worked on Broadway, right, especially in a hit show like that. That it was really fulfilling, but. My kids for years have laughed at me for the way I dance. They always tell me, they show me the newest step, and I say, no, this is the way I dance.
Well, we had Barry Livingston on. He was telling me what he watches. Believe it or not, he watches some reality TV, and I shouldn't knock it because maybe you do too. What do you watch? Because I'm always interested to know people from classic television, what they think of TV today and what they watch.
Well, you probably don't want to know what I want to watch, because basically I watch news. I watch a lot of the financial networks. I watch very, very little television of sitcoms or anything like that. In fact, there's no show that I'm so dedicated to. I'm not saying I don't like them if I happen to be here and flip one on, but it just has to be on. There's no show that's a destination show for me right now.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Barbara, because she really was the quintessential TV mom. I think, everybody talks Florence Henderson. Florence Henderson's great, and you may know her or whatever, but Barbara, to me, was the TV mom. And, it's been like a year now. I think she's been
2
gone.
years.
2 years. And I know you and her were really close, weren't you?
Very, very definitely. It wasn't like, and I think people get a little mixed up. I mean, as I say, I knew I had a mother, and I'd go home to my mom, but Barbara was like the best teacher you ever had, that you got to have for more than 1 year, or maybe an aunt or something like that was your favorite aunt, because she was always there for me. She was the nicest woman you'd ever want to meet. She was just such a generous person. She was always very, very involved in all sorts of different charities. In fact, her and her husband founded quite a few different charities that she would basically help support and get started and then move on with other charities, but still supporting the ones. So she was just an absolutely wonderful person. Hugh Beaumont was the same. In fact, Hugh Beaumont was actually a Methodist minister and graduated with my dad from USC, and then he was unmarried at the time and decided, well, I could take a very poor parish because it's just me, or congregation, I guess it is, and so he took this congregation and then got married and had kids and only became an actor to support himself as a minister. Now, when he did Leave It to Beaver, of course, because that was a full-time job, he had to give up the ministry, but he actually went back to it after he finished Leave It to Beaver. Mm-hmm. So I think that came through, too. But both Barbara and Hugh were just the very, very nicest people in the world.
So did your TV parents and real parents, did they kind of hang out together?
Not really. As if, we all had different, lived in different areas. And as I say, my mom and dad, my dad was very busy because he was, running a school. He was the principal of Granada Hills High School out here. So he was very, very busy. And, Barbara's husband was a doctor. We would see each other, but it was pretty much a work environment where everybody went home to their own families and did their own things. And we were all very, very different types of people.
Jerry, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to ask you about and have you talk about this as well, because of course everyone remembers you for Leave It to Beaver and being an actor and things like that. But you've also kind of become an activist and a spokesperson for awareness about diabetes, as well as working with the Partnership for Prescription Assistance Program. So can you talk a little bit about working with those organizations? I know that you were actually diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I finished Leave It to Beaver, the new Leave It to Beaver, I figured I'd been an actor for a long time, and I actually invested in a few companies, and one of the companies that I invested in was a catering company. So we were doing all sorts of, different catering jobs for like Judge Judy and different movies. And one of the specialties of our catering company is that we had a 45-foot dessert tray, and we had dessert chefs that made up all sorts of great things. And after about a year and a half, I put on about 60 pounds because I was constantly eating with either clients or just being around. So I put on a lot of weight, and I have a very, very good friend who's a doctor, and she started looking at me and started telling me, you better come in for a physical. And I kept telling her, I feel fine. And I'd look around me, and a lot of people were as heavy as I was. And I'd go into a restaurant, and they'd say, do you want the king portion or the queen portion or the regular cut? I'd say, give me the king portion. And she finally got me, though. She said, she knew me pretty well. And she said, you know what? For Christmas, I'm going to give you a free physical. Now, how could I turn that down? Right. So I went and took the physical and went back about 3 days later for her to, go over it with me. And she said, you have 3 kids. I said, yeah. And they were a lot younger than me. Of course, they are right now. She said, how would you like to see him graduate from high school? I said, of course, and get married and hold your grandkids. And all the things she said were things that I'd been looking forward to forever. And she said, if you don't do something about this diabetes, which is something that I had heard about that people had but didn't know anything about it, she said, you'll be dead in probably 3 to 5 years. And this just really knocked me. You could have knocked me over with a feather when she told me that, because I realized that I was overweight, but I didn't realize how much trouble that I was really in. And, diabetes is just a devastating disease because there aren't a whole lot of symptoms until you really get it. And once you get it, it can be very, very bad. So I lost the weight, and actually right now, and for about the last 6 or 7 years, I've been pre-diabetic. Now, I know that probably sooner or later, as I get older, my pancreas will not make enough insulin, and I may have to go on either pills or, go on to taking insulin, but living is a whole lot better than not living. So it's something that, and I just feel that if this doctor hadn't told me that I would probably be dead right now. So whenever I have a public forum, I always tell people that, if you're overweight, there's a very, very good chance if you're more than 20 to 30 pounds overweight that you may be at risk for diabetes, and definitely get yourself checked out.
Wow.
And then the thing for prescription programs, you're an advocate for people that can't really afford them, right?
Right. What that is it's a database. It's called the Partnership for Prescription Assistance, and it's for people that have a chronic disease that need medicine all the time, and the pharmaceutical companies then donate the medicine so that those people that, and you have to meet certain eligibility requirements, which is, how much money you make a year, depending on sometimes your state that you're in too, what the poverty level is. But it's for people with chronic diseases that, couldn't afford the medicine any other way, and they will then be donated to them without charge.
Wow. Well, one thing that's cool about you is you kind of transcend music also, and we want to mention this. We played, actually, I don't know if you ever heard it. I'll get a copy to your wife. There was a punk rock song called Beaver Cleaver. And I don't know if you guys were punk rock, I doubt that, but didn't you have a band called Beaver and the Trappers?
We had Beaver and the Trappers. It was my friend Richard Carell, who is now a huge director over at Disney. He played on Leave It to Beaver, Richard Rickover. He's actually directed most of the Hannah Montanas and all those other shows over there at Disney. So he was the drummer. I was the rhythm guitar player. We had a couple other friends. We were basically a high school band, because that was one of the things. I didn't totally withdraw from being an actor. So when I was in high school, we used to play all the sock hops and proms, and then Atlantic and ADCO asked us to record for them. So we did a 45, and it was okay. It's a lot of drums and a lot of fun, but we were a pretty good rock and roll band for our day.
So was that the pop record you put out? Because I imagine they're really hard to find. By the way, we have them, Jerry.
Okay. Which one do you have?
We have this A side and the B side.
We have Don't You Cry and Wind Up Toy.
Okay, that's actually before that. That was done right when I was doing Leave It to Beaver. So that's done with actually a full orchestra and all sorts of stuff like that.
So
I cut, as I say, several records, because I did have a band called Beaver and the Trappers when I was in high school.
Wow, I have more to find now. I imagine they're pretty hard to find, but I'll be looking. So I got to know, did you kind of look at that as the first record, the 45 we talked about, Don't You Cry and all that? Did you look at that as kind of a novelty thing, or were you taking yourself really serious and all of a sudden you thought you were going to be Ricky Nelson? And
actually, that was something that at that time, if you were on a series, everybody did a record, because it was another, a stream of income for you. I mean, Paul Peterson did, She Can't Find Her Keys. Shelley Fabre did one. And what it would do would be that during the summers, that was one of my summer jobs. I would go around to all the theme parks all over the country, and you would get up and sing a couple songs and, do a quick little talk about Leave It to Beaver. And that's how I bought my first car.
Oh, there you go. So I got to know, too, being and growing up in television, I know, a lot of them worried about if girls really like them or really like themselves. Did you have trouble with girlfriends? I mean, did you get a lot of girlfriends because of the show and you made sure they liked you for you? Or? Well,
actually, I got more girlfriends because of being in the band. Because if you were in a local band that was playing all the sock hops, you got a lot more to choose from. So it was, I had a very, very, as I say, good life. I had a lot of friends. That was the nice part, because cutting it off right when I was leaving elementary school and going to high school, I had a much better social life than if I had to work through Leave It to Beaver and had just been on the set every day, as Tony Dow did. And he, in some ways, worked all through his high school years on Leave It to Beaver and had not a tougher time, but it was probably a little bit harder for him. But because I quit in the 8th grade and went to the 9th grade to a regular school, by the middle of the 10th grade, we had a very popular band that we were playing all the parochial and public schools all over the valley. So I met a lot of people and had a really good time.
And it's crazy too, because I'm sure you guys all loved each other after the show. Like you said, you were all close. When Ken Osmond became a cop, that had to scare you guys, and he almost got killed, didn't he?
He almost got killed. He is probably the most patriotic person that you'd ever want to meet. He's a member of the American Legion and just a total patriot. When he joined the LAPD, it took him probably 6 weeks or 7 weeks to get on the force, because he's so skinny that he couldn't make the weight requirement. So he had to drink malts and eat bananas for like 2 days before the thing just to be able to make the weight to be an LAPD officer. Once he got on the force, he asked to be put down in Pershing Square. And people that don't know Los Angeles, it's a nice place now, but at that time, he was telling me he was seeing 2 to 3 bodies every night down there. It was a very, very rough part of town. And one night he was chasing somebody that had just stolen a cab and shot a cab driver. And he pulled the guy over, and the guy got out and started running, and he chased him around a corner. And the guy had squatted down right as he went up by around the corner and shot him 3 times. And the guy had hot loads in the gun, and it knocked him about 8 feet up a wall. He had a flak vest on, but it actually separated his ribs. One of the bullets, he bounced off the part of your belt that runs up and down. So they told him he only had 2 more years when he could retire. They said, well, you know, you can come back and work for 2 years, or you know, in the office, but you can't be a motorcycle cop anymore. And he said, nope, just retire me. If I can't be on the street, you know, just retire me. So he's really definitely a patriot and a very, very brave individual.
And being on the front lines like that, too, I know 60s singer Bobby Sherman kind of become a cop. He wears a uniform, but he's mostly a paramedic. But to be out there with the guns and the thugs, man.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny was right there. It had nothing to do with, you know, he was a street cop down in the worst part of L.A. for many, many years. I think he was on the force, I think it was 18 years. So it wasn't like he was just somebody playing around down there. He was down in it, in the musty muck.
Now, in knowing that Leave It to Beaver had a resurgence and became the sequel series, if you want to call it a sequel series, and wound up at the Disney Channel and on TBS too, I believe. Finally, later on, when they did a feature film of Leave It to Beaver with different actors, did you kind of look at that as, well, we probably won't be coming back and do anything with the remaining actors? No,
I just read the script and didn't particularly like it.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame you. I get that from most people's been in the things, because you got something classic. You can't redo it unless it has the people themselves in it, like what Disney was so intelligent to do, you know?
Yeah, as I say, there were just a lot of, like the Eddie Haskell character. There were a lot of things in that particular film when I read it that I said, you know, I'm not going to do it. I'll tell you if you want me to be in it, you know, how to fix it, or what I would consider fixing it. And they said no, and I said, well, fine. And so, I mean, I have nothing against them, but it honestly didn't do that well at the theaters, and I knew that when I read it, because that's not what people expect when they go to see a Leave It to Beaver, a movie or even a TV show.
Right. Well, I want to give you a chance.
Parameters that you have to meet for that, you know, because people have a certain idea of what the show is going to be.
Right.
And when you break those parameters, then, you know, people just kind of go, well, what is this? Because it wasn't. It was more of an updated version, what they call updated, but what I just didn't think it was as good.
Exactly. I want to give you a chance to talk about the fact that you do a lot of speaking engagements, and you do a lot of things for like companies and stuff, to where they can hire you to come and do like a Q&A or give a speech. How can people get a hold of you, and how can they arrange this, and what's some of the kind of speaking engagements you do?
You know, I go all over the country. I do a lot of medical fairs and things like that. They're basically about diabetes, and what I always do say is it's kind of like fishing. I go out and I talk about Leave It to Beaver, but as I say, I got to be who I am and live this life because somebody told me that I have diabetes. So I always work diabetes into it, and so I do a lot of medical fairs and things like that, because I was very lucky, and a lot of people just don't have a doctor, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that it's kind of a silent killer, and it creeps up on you. You know, I'm registered with all the major program bureaus all across the country, so most people that you know, want to find me, it's not that hard. They just call up the people that book speakers, because most of the speaker bureaus I'm registered with, and I do. In fact, my wife and I are getting ready now. We're going with Princess Cruises on a cruise from here to Samoa, and I'll be lecturing on the cruise about Leave It to Beaver and the Alfred Hitchcock movie that I did. And it's a really fun life. Leave It to Beaver is, and it still is presenting me with so many opportunities, and it's a great show, and I'm just very, very lucky to have been associated with it.
I'm glad to hear that, because I just hate it when celebrities or stars that did stuff like they don't want to have anything to do with it. And, you know, it's better to be known for something great than to be known for nothing at all.
That's very, very true. And as I say, and Leave It to Beaver, and it's not just me. It was everybody on it. And in fact, a lot of the people that people will never know. The camera work is so great. The sound work. Everybody on the show was, an expert and just the highest professionalism of their type of work. And it's just an absolutely great show. And I'm just very, very happy to be, even being able to be associated with it.
Well, in wrapping this up, now you have a Facebook account, a Twitter account too. You wouldn't by chance know the account names that people can find? If not, we can put them up in our page.
Yeah, why don't you just put them up? That's easier because they'll never remember it if I just tell them.
And we
I
need
know
to
it's the Jerry Mathers on Twitter because somebody already had Jerry Mathers.
Oh, okay. Well, that happens. Is some people get really upset about that. I've known some TV people, movie people that had to sue to get the name back. It's crazy.
Actually, people just go in and they book all those things, and they expect you to pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to use your own name.
I know there's always that thing that a lot of people from older TV shows go through too, to where a lot of times people think you're dead and you're not. There's always rumors.
Actually, yeah, I was reported dead in Vietnam.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
It was actually. I don't know if it was the person. I was in the Air Force. I spent 6 years in the Air Force and National Guard. And when I was actually in the Air Force, a friend of mine came in one morning and said, "Did you read this? It's so funny." I said, "What?" And it said, "Actor killed in Vietnam." And it said, "Jerry Mathers of Leave It to Beaver." Now, probably what happened was that somebody either with the same name or a similar name died, and they just didn't bother to do their research and knew I was in the Air Force. Because I had actually, in fact, one of the times I gave away an award, an Emmy, was when I was in uniform, so people knew that I was, a part of the service. And it is a very sad thing, but if there's anything that's even a little humorous about it, is that when I would be walking, and people that really knew me, like people that I went to high school with, or people that I actually knew that hadn't seen me for a while because I was in the service, I'd walk down the street and they'd see me and they'd get a kind of weird look on their face and they'd go, "Oh, hi, Jerry, how you doing?" I'd say, "Oh, I'm doing fine. How are you doing?" They'd say, "Well, I'm doing good, but I heard you were dead. You're not, are you?" I'd say, No, I'm definitely not. I'm doing fine."
Well, they don't. Well, I guess they do. I almost said they don't give awards to dead people. I guess they do posthumously. But you just received a great honor, and I wanted to mention this before we close here that you received some kind of a Lifetime Achievement Award, didn't you?
Yes, from the Motion Picture and Television Academy. But I've gotten quite a few awards over it, and it's always a bonus when people recognize you for your work. So it's always fun, and I get to meet a lot of nice people. And I've been an actor now for many, many years and done just about everything you can do. I'm a licensed radio DJ. I've been on TV for many, many years. I've done major motion pictures. I've been on Broadway. So I've pretty much run the whole circuit, and it's always nice to have people say, "But you know what? I either saw this show," and a lot of times it's Leave It to Beaver, or "I saw you on Broadway," or "I saw a movie you did." And it's just always nice to have people say that they appreciate your work.
Well, totally you read my mind, Jerry, because we're going to say goodbye now, but I wanted to do this in the last segment because I know you're a licensed FCC broadcaster. I mean, you probably got yours legitimately. I bribed them to get mine, but...
yeah, I just had to take a little test.
I don't even know if they do that anymore. I know they did it back then, but I don't even know if they have them take that test anymore. It's crazy. But anyway...
you can be a DJ without it. If you want to run your own board, you have to be licensed.
There you go. Yeah, I'm the one that used to be on a country station and play rock and roll. So
I was on a 50,000 watt clear channel. So it would be funny because people would be saying, "Play me like morning music" or "Play me afternoon music." But I was going all across the country. In fact, all the way in some places. Even one time, I got a call from somebody that picked it up in Australia.
Wow, that's cool. Do you ever do like gigs on like XM or Sirius? I know a lot of times they like to get personalities on and do things.
I have done them in the past, and I just go down there. And a lot of times when people go on vacation, I'll take over their show for a week or so. But I'm getting pretty old, and honestly, a lot of their new music, I'm just really not up on.
Oh, Jerry, you're not even retirement age yet. You're not that old.
I don't know about that, but as I say, it's always fun to do radio. Radio is one of the most fun things to do because you just, it's theater of the mind. When you're working in front of a camera, you can use your body and everything else. But when you're actually doing a radio show, you're working with theater of the mind, and you can take people just about any place you want just by talking with them.
Exactly. That's why we play a lot of old-time radio here, too, because it really is like you see these pictures in your mind, it's a movie in your mind, and I always say it's intelligent people that watch more radio. Watch radio, and in fact, you can see it in your head if you try really hard. But
well, it stimulates you a lot more.
Yes, for sure. We thank your lovely wife so much for coming on. My daughter really enjoys working with her. She's a great lady, and you've got
yes, she definitely is. I got very, very lucky.
Lucky in the fact she's a publicist too, Jerry. I mean,
well, you have to pick them.
Yeah, well, like Walter Lantz, he married like the voice of Woody Woodpecker, so it's a smart thing financially. On top of the fact that you love her too, so
that's the good part. That's the best part.
Yeah, but we thank you so much for coming on, and we want to say goodbye. But in knowing that you are a disc jockey, we have your 245 records here, and we'd like you to introduce them. And of course, it's your records.
Now you have to tell me which ones they are, though.
Okay.
Don't You Cry and Wind Up Toy?
Exactly. So whichever one you want to introduce first, we'll let you do that, and we'll say goodbye here.
Well, I actually like Wind Up Toy. I think that's the better of the two. That was the A side.
Good. That's what I got cued.
That was my favorite one, too, of the two.
Yeah. Don't You Cry is kind of like one of those, at the time, Paul Peterson, everybody was doing a love ballad. I never liked it particularly, but that's what Atlantic wanted, so we did that one. But I would like to start off with Wind Up Toy, which is an absolutely great song with a lot of cool drums, and I'm singing, and actually I play a little guitar on it too. So here it is, Jerry Mathers and Wind Up Toy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jerry.
Bye-bye.